If you're at the beginning of learning how to create a walking bass line, or if there's a tune that you feel like you haven't really got a handle on yet, I've got a specific plan for us to learn how to improvise a walking bass line on a tune. Let's do it now. Welcome to Learn Jazz Bass with Matt Rybicki. I'm Matt and I've been playing bass for over 30 years. I teach at the Juilliard School and at University of North Carolina School for the Arts, and I've played with folks like Wynton Marsalis and Gerald Clayton. I'm glad that you're here. We're talking about a specific system that if you were to need the most time possible to do this system, you could improvise a walking bass line on a tune you didn't know in 8 weeks. Now, you probably don't need that much time, and I'll explain why in a minute. But this is not just for you to learn how to repeat something, but rather to actually create and improvise your own line. So we've got several steps that we'll go through so that you can understand what you need to do. Step one is to, of course, choose a tune. And I've got another video about learning tunes, and there are, of course, a million suggestions online about tunes you should know. It doesn't really matter what the tune is, but choose something, get a good recording, find multiple recordings, especially if there's a definitive one or a first version of it. Find a good lead sheet, one that is properly sort of vetted. That could be like the legal real books. And what you want to do before we get started on the system is to reduce the chords that are written. What I mean is, either you can take out some chords if you really know what you're doing, but more to the point, I want you to sweep away extraneous information that we don't need for the very foundational aspects of bass line. What I mean are the tensions. So any 9s that are mentioned, any 11s that are mentioned, any 13s that are mentioned, do away with them. But in parentheses as well, sometimes you might see some change to the 5, so we need to keep that. And there might be some change to the 7. In one instance, like a minor major 7, they're going to tell you need to play a major 7. So anything that talks about a 5 or a 7, you need to keep. Anything that's 9, 11, 13, throw it away. So the tune I'm using today for our example is Softly as in a Morning Sunrise. Some of you may already know it. And in the legal real book, for example, in measure 2, there's a parenthetical alternate chord on top, A flat. We're going to throw that away. But you see is D minor 7 flat 5. We're going to keep that flat 5. There's a G7 flat 9 sharp 5. So there's exactly where we're talking about. We're going to do away with the 9, but keep that sharp 5 as far as what we're keeping in mind and what we're going to work on. So once we've got these chords sort of reduced, so to speak, what we want to do is simply find the roots, fifths, and octaves of the root, and the fifth if you want, of these chords. This is going to be sort of our home base, and it's going to help us to sort of turn things around this central core of root and fifth, okay? The fifth is not a really descriptive sound. It's really sort of passive in the sound of the chord, but it helps to keep us centered and gives us something to use that is not too complicated. So when we're looking at the tune Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, what I'm suggesting with this plan is that you choose small segments. I would say 4 bars, right? You could do less, you could do more. And if you do more, that's going to take the whole time down you need to work on faster. In this instance, we're getting a 2 for 1 because we're getting a 4 for 1 because all the A sections have these 3 chords repeating. C minor 6, and D minor 7 flat 5, G7 sharp 5. So we really only have to figure out much of this stuff one time essentially, but we have to apply it as the tune actually goes. So we're going to figure out the root and fifth of each chord. For finding the 5th and 6th and 7th and so on, I will be presenting all this stuff in much more detail in the new course I'm going to have in September, so look for that. But suffice it to say, we'll do a little more quickly here. Root is, of course, what is written on the chord itself. That's going to be C in the first instance. The 5th will be G. And then, of course, the octave of the root is C again. Root 5, C. Bar 2 and bar 4 as well is D minor 7 flat 5, G7 sharp 5. So D is the root, And then the flat 5 is A flat. And then the octave of D. Root, flat 5, root. And then G is the root of the next one. Sharp 5 is D sharp. G. Okay, so let's say that we've worked on this and you figured out what those are. And we should do this without a play along, for example. And I want to sort of preface this all by saying that a play along is an essential tool to use with the system. Try to avoid iReal Pro. I know it's so convenient, but really that you will, I believe, benefit if you do anything else. Abersols or Band in a Box, or even stuff on YouTube where people have used Band in a Box to create one. Like anything but iReal Pro, if you must use it, of course, it's fine. So when you're figuring out what these notes are, the root and fifth, don't use the play along, but then do put the play along on and improvise some lines with just those notes. You can go as slow as you want. You can do whole notes, half notes. It depends what works for you. You can do quarter notes right from the beginning. For this particular segment of Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, we could go root, root, fifth, fifth, root, fifth, root, fifth, root, root, fifth, root, fifth, root, fifth, root, root, fifth, fifth, root, fifth, root, fifth. And remember, I'm keeping the alterations to the 5 in there. That's an important aspect. That is a critical part of what makes up these chords. All right, so you've taken some time to really figure out what those notes are in those 4 bars or 2 bars, whatever it is, and you sort of reinforce them by playing them. So now turn off the play along again, and we want to do 4 steps for each of those notes. We want to find, well, there's two notes really, and it's octave, but it helps to use an octave. But we want to talk about the approach notes that are possible to those specific chord tones, the roots and fifths. The first one is to approach the root from a half step below and figure out what that is. So our first root is C. So a half step below that is B natural. Figure out just what it is. And then the octave, B to C. The next root is D. What's a half step below D? C sharp. Or the octave. The next chord is G, so F sharp to G. So B, C, C sharp, D, B, C, like that. So when we know what those approach notes are, again, put on the play along and improvise with those specifically, just with roots and fifths, approaching them from half step below. There's only a couple things you can do within that certain octave. That said, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's not supposed to. You're just supposed to be reinforcing where the possibilities are. When you've got a half step, use it, do a half step above. Our first root is C, so the half step above C is D flat. The next root is D, half step above that is E flat. And then A flat to G, so D flat, C. And then we're gonna figure out what those notes are without a play along, put the play along on, and improvise a little bit, again, roots and fifths. Not super complicated, but you're already adding a little spice to your line. Okay, so we've got half step below, half step above, 2 more. Do a whole step below and a whole step above. A whole step below C is B flat to C. A whole step below D is C to D. A whole step below G is F to G. And figure them out and improvise. Then a whole step above, so D to C. And then E natural to D, and then A natural to G, which we've not played E's and A's yet, but it's an important aspect of doing this is to figure out exactly what those approach notes are. Okay, so now we've done half step below, half step above, whole step below, whole step above. improvise a line that uses all of this stuff at your leisure, okay? That's day one, all right, of the tune. So you've got four bars of the tune, day one. Day two of a week-long process, day two is to figure out and do the same thing for the thirds and sixth or seventh of a chord. So we're going to complete the 4-part chord. The same steps that we just did with the root and fifth. And we're still using those same 4 measures. So again, the same 4 measures have this repeating 2-measure thing. So we really just need to figure out 2 measures and repeat it. For C6, we had the root and fifth. Root is C, fifth is G. The third is an E flat. That's flat, it's a flat third. And it's a minor 6 chord, so we're going to use a natural 6, which is A natural. So we've got C, E flat, that's the third. G is the fifth, A is the sixth. The same thing with the D and the G. D flat 3 is F, we have a flat 5 we already knew about. Now we got a flat 7, which is C natural. And then G7 sharp 5, we've got the root. The third is B natural, because that's part of a dominant chord. D sharp, sharp 5, a flat 7, part of a dominant chord. And you'll figure all this out and know a little bit more as you go. This is just a general overview. So we figured out what those notes are out of time. We're going to improvise a line with those specific notes. Then we're going to take one of those other parts, so let's say whatever the third is, whether it's flat third or natural third, and we're going to figure out the chromatic approach from below. So for C minor 6, the third is flat third, E flat, half step below is D, so, and then the fifth there. I'll play the fifth in that instance, you don't have to, but so, and then for D, the third is F natural, we'll play a half step below, E. We're approaching it from half step below. Do the same thing where you find them, play them. Go on, stop the play along, find half step above, play it. Find from half step below, whole step below the third, play it. Find a whole step above the third, play it. Then go on and do that with the sixth or the seventh. And this will start to get really fast for you over time, especially over a long period of time, meaning like weeks, months, like it becomes really second nature. But we're talking about really getting inside a tune, right? So it's really helpful that we break down into these steps, especially, again, as I said, if we're at the beginning of our journey. So now we've got all 4 parts of the chords, and we found approach notes to each one of those 4 parts. You want to improvise a line where you are going at your leisure, and finding approach notes to all those parts of the chord that you want to do. You're just reinforcing the information that you know, keeping the roots on the downbeats of where the chord occurs, and trying to keep in mind the important notes of the chord. Of course, in the D minor 7 flat 5 to G7, those are only 2 beats, so you don't have to obviously fit in everything until we get to scales in a second. So, and arpeggios. So anyway, so you're playing with that. Okay, we've got those main chords. Now we're going to actually assemble the arpeggios together specifically, and we want to do it so that we understand what the 4 are all together, the 4 parts of each chord, and we want to be able to play them. Importantly, we should play them in time and in sequence. So for this particular example, we've got the C minor 6, and then D minor 7 flat 5, G7 sharp 5. Okay, so 1. That's an awkward sort of leap from that C to the G, isn't it? But we do want to play them in time. And so if our time is like 1, 2, 3, 4. You you see those giant leaps that I have to make, especially from if I play the G here and I'm back to this C here. That goes to the next step of, this is day 3 now. Day 2 is thirds and sevenths. This day 3 is arpeggios. So that goes to this next point in the arpeggios, that we want to start exploring the inversions of the arpeggios. Inversions means that you're taking the same 4 notes and putting them in a different order. Your first note is different than the root, and we usually think about them, and they are called, going in order. So the first would be the root. First inversion, I'm saying the root position would be the root. First inversion starts on the 3rd. Second inversion starts on the 5th. Third inversion starts on whatever the 4th part of the chord is, be it a 6th or 7th. So for C minor 6, root position is C, E flat, G, A. First inversion would start with those same notes starting with E flat. It does not matter what order you play them in. It's just the beginning note that you're starting. So E flat, G, A, C. That's first inversion. Second inversion would start from the 5th, which we know is G, G, A, C, E flat. And a third inversion would start from the 6th in this instance, or the 7th if it's the 7th chord. We're starting from A, that's the 6th, A, and then the same notes, C, E flat, G. And in fact, that's an A minor 7 flat 5 chord, which we'll hear about more another time. But so we're taking those inversions, and what we want to do when we're playing the arpeggios in time, you should figure this out ahead of time without a play along, is you want to find instances where using an inversion makes sense to avoid those giant leaps that I just showed you. So for example, if we start from root position with a C minor, C, E flat, G, A. Now the next chord is D minor 7 flat 5, and what we had been doing was jumping down to play the D on the root. But what's a note that's available of those 4 we know by the A? Flat 5, A flat right there. So if we play C, E flat, G, A, and now A flat, and you could jump down to D if you want from here, or you could play the 3rd. And this is a whole step away from the root of the next one. So that makes a lot of sense as well. So we want to keep it within a whole step or a half step. If you can find an inversion where that is a whole step or half step from where you are in the moment for the next chord, then you're going to make a much more logical and smooth sounding line. So you want to play along with that and really sort of make sure that you absolutely know what the arpeggios are. In fact, do not move on to the next day's work. Repeat this until you are absolutely sure that you are very confident about what the 4 parts of every chord is, because that is going to be a touchstone, a keystone, a cornerstone for everything that you're doing. So do that. And day 4 is going to be dealing with scales for these same chords in these same 4 bars. What you want to do is research what are some available scales and just find something. It doesn't have to be complicated, just find something that you're going to use, because there's a lot of options to come and you'll learn a lot more as time goes. Just stick to one thing and don't look back. It's totally fine if you don't cover what every scale is for this particular chord. Do not worry about it. We're just using something, again, to latch onto. So our 3 chords, C minor 6, D minor 7, flat 5, G7, sharp 5. This is an important scale to know anyway, would be a melodic minor scale. So for the C minor 6, we're going to use that particular scale. That would be C, D, E flat, F, G, A natural, B natural, C. The D minor 7 flat 5, I'm going to choose, I prefer like a Locrian natural 9 sound, which sounds complicated. It's essentially an E flat major scale starting from D, but instead of E flat, we're playing E natural. That natural 9 sound sounds better to me in this particular instance. So D, E natural instead of E flat, but then the rest is all in E flat major scale. F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D. And for the G7 sharp 5, that also comes from a melodic minor scale. It's actually from A flat melodic minor. What this essentially leads us to is an altered scale, which I've talked about before. And this is what I'm choosing here for altered. So that's root, flat 9, A flat, sharp 9 is A sharp or B flat, B natural, then a sharp 5 or flat 5. I'm sorry, sharp 4 or flat 5. Then the sharp 5, which is part of the chord, F, G, G, F, D sharp, C sharp, B, B flat, A flat, G. And I know in this bar I'm mixing sharps and flats, which we're not supposed to do, but it's really hard to communicate having a chord have a sharp 5 and call it that, but also like we've got a flat 9 in there and a sharp 9 in the scale and so on. So anyway, those are the scales that we chose. You could go much simpler if you wanted to, but you're going to do some research to find out what those scales are. You're going to, without a backing track, be sure that you are able to really know the scale you're using for that first chord, memorize it, play it as many times as possible so that whatever method works for you, to memorize that scale, okay? Like we memorized the arpeggios, you have to memorize that scale you're going to use. Just that one. Don't worry about alternates right now. Memorize it, go on to the next one, memorize that, and so on. In this instance, again, we're only memorizing 3 scales. In 4 bars, oftentimes you might have 4 different chords maximum. I mean, with like rhythm changes, the 2 chords every bar, it seems like you've got to memorize a lot more, but when you research, you find out that one scale or a couple scales can work on a couple of those chords, so it's not as complicated as it seems. So have the information on what those scales are we're going to use on these 4 bars, and now we're going to actually perform those, again, in time and in sequence. Because you've got a lot of notes to fit into 2 beats in the bars that have 2 chords, there's a variety of ways that you can play it. You can get sort of all the scale in 2 beats by playing 16th notes. You can get a lot of the scale in by playing triplets, or you can just get half the scale in by playing 8th notes, and that's fine. So if we were to play the triplets, for example, if our time is 1, 2, 3, 4. Take your time, it's okay. The important thing is that you try it and that you're sure of what those notes are in the scale that you're playing. For day 5, what we're just doing is assembling everything we've done so far. So you want to be able to create lines using all these tools that we talked about, all this data that we've curated for ourselves, and create lines. But importantly, get your notebook out, make a notebook or get out your notebook and keep track of lines that you like. And what I've included in the PDF below is a sample exercise sheet where what I've done is put the 4 chords on top of the page, and then we want to have within that and 4 more examples. So 5 examples of lines that can work getting from one chord to the next or one bar to the next. And you want to make special note of lines that you create that you really like. That's your vocabulary. So that can be any combination of roots, fifths, octaves, thirds, sixths or sevenths, approaches to any of those, scale approaches that we use, which would be the same as those approach notes in certain instances. But you are just using that information, improvising, finding a way that makes sense to get from root to root in this instance, and writing those down. If you come up with root to something else, which we'll talk about in my course in September, that's great too. So if you have a line that has the third on the downbeat of the next bar, totally fine, work from there, you're doing great. So that really will help to solidify all this information that you are improvising. Improvising is not always creating something new. In fact, it's usually not creating something new. It's about assembling information that you already have. When you are improvising, talking to somebody, you are using words that you already know. You are not creating new words to talk to somebody. You're putting them together in new ways. That's true, oftentimes, but sometimes you're not. You're saying a cliche, right? So you're just taking this data and finding combinations that work for you. Day 6 has to do with using everything that you've done, but making sure that you memorize things that are important. So you're spending the whole practice session reinforcing everything you've done so far. That means understanding all the arpeggios, making sure you memorize them. Understanding all the scales, making sure you memorize them. Being able to perform those 4 chords in time in any way with arpeggios and scales, making sure you can do that. Reinforcing any lines that you like, and improvising more on those same things. So you just, the last day, this is the last day of the system, is to just really reinforce. You may wanna make that a 2-day thing, or if you wanna be really motivated, you can start the whole system again on day 7, so it's not really a full week, or you take a rest day. But, so either reinforce it for 2 days, take a rest day, or if you're really motivated, just start again with the next 4 bars. And that's the next section. We are repeating all these 6 steps for the next 4 bars of the tune. As I said before, this can go really quickly sometimes because very often we've got a bunch of repetition within tunes, right? Which is great. So use the information you've already got. So as I said, 8 weeks is like the maximum. If you've got every chord is different, you've never sort of created lines before, you don't understand how to make a dominant chord, that takes 8 weeks. But that's gonna get faster too. And if you do have some experience doing this and the chords repeat and so on and so forth, you can create really functional lines in just maybe a week or 2 at most. So this is a particular way of thinking clinically about how to really get inside a tune that you're working on. I hope that this was helpful for you today. Thanks for joining me. Look for that PDF below. Also, if it is in summer of 2025, I'm teaching my online Juilliard class this September. Everyone is welcome. You're all welcome to sign up. This is different from the new course that I am creating that is about the beginning walking bass lines. So please be sure to look for the PDF below, look for those other links below. Thanks for joining me, and always remember, straight ahead and strive for tone.